There are stories that seem simple, without gunshots, without storms, but they make the listener's heart tremble deeply. That is the story of Jack, a man who silently sacrificed his whole life, of Tien, a girl with scattered memories, but whose heart never stopped searching for something lost, and of a small village where the past, present, and future intertwine like a colorful tapestry. And it all starts from a peaceful morning, with a letter that seems meaningless but opens up a journey of love, loss, and resurrection. A quiet morning in Tien village. The morning in Tien village was peaceful. The sun had just risen over the distant mountains, its pale rays spreading a soft golden hue across the red-tiled rooftops. The crowing of roosters echoed from the narrow alleys, blending with the sound of bamboo brooms sweeping courtyards and the gentle rustle of wind through old bamboo groves. Inside a small house along the village road, Jack had just woken up. He stepped into the kitchen, where his mother, who had devoted her whole life to caring for the family, was busy by the boiling pot of water. "Awake already, son?" she asked, lifting her head, the familiar warm smile lighting up a face marked by years of hard work. "Yes, Mom. What are you doing?" Jack replied as he splashed water on his face. "Just some chores. Oh, someone from your office dropped off some documents for you. And there's also a letter from the commune council." "A letter?" Jack dried his hands and took the envelope from her. White paper, red seal. He frowned slightly. "It must have come yesterday, right?" "Yes, the postman brought it yesterday afternoon." Jack opened it. It was an invitation and a call for donations to help build a memorial monument and the village's new entrance gate. There was also a meeting invitation for this morning at 8:30. He nodded thoughtfully. "Looks like I'll have to attend the meeting, Mom." His mother smiled. "Yes, go if you can. It's a good thing for the village. Give what you can, big or small, what matters is the heart." Jack pondered for a moment. He had spoken with Mr. Viet, the commune chairman, about this project before. For Jack, such monuments were not just cold concrete and stone. They were memories, places where future generations could honor those who had fallen. He wanted to contribute as a small gesture of gratitude. Just then, from upstairs, Tien came down. The young woman, with her long hair still damp and her delicate face tinged with a faint sadness, as though part of her memory lay hidden behind mist, moved quietly across the room. "Jack, what's that letter?" she asked softly, tilting her head. "It's an invitation to the meeting. The village is building a memorial and a new gate. I'm planning to go." "Oh, I see." She nodded gently. Jack looked at her wet hair. "Tien, next time don't bend over to wash your hair here at home. Go to the salon across the road. It's easier and safer. Especially now, since you're expecting, you shouldn't strain yourself." His mother chimed in. "Yes, dear. If you want to wash your hair, tell me. We can go together." Tien smiled faintly. "I just thought I'd do it quickly since there was shampoo here." Jack shook his head. "Let me dry your hair. It's easy to catch a cold like this. You should go to your meeting. I can manage." "It's fine. I still have time." Breakfast passed with the small, ordinary conversations of family life. Jack's mother talking about visiting relatives back in the countryside, Tien planning to stay home alone, Jack reminding her to take care. Be careful when walking, call him if she needed groceries. Don't do anything too heavy. All simple words, yet carrying a quiet warmth. Before leaving, Jack turned to Tien. "I'll be back after the meeting. Take care of yourself. Okay?" She nodded lightly, a faint smile on her face, though behind it lingered a shadow of unspoken sorrow. The door closed behind him. It was an ordinary morning, or so it seemed, but from that very moment, the wheels of fate began turning towards something no one could have foreseen. The village road stretched lazily under the morning sun, dust glimmering like tiny fireflies each time a bicycle passed. Inside the small house, after Jack left for the village meeting, silence returned, broken only by the occasional clatter of dishes as Tien moved around the kitchen. She paused by the window, her gaze drifting toward the distant fields where the horizon met the sky. There was something about mornings like this, too quiet, too gentle, that stirred a strange unease inside her. Tien had been living here for several months now, yet pieces of her life before this place felt like pages torn from a book, scattered by the wind. She tried to remember faces, voices, moments. Sometimes a name surfaced, sometimes a place, but then it slipped away like water through her fingers. Only Jack seemed constant. Jack, with his steady voice and patient smile. Jack, who cooked when she forgot to eat. Jack, who never complained when she woke up crying in the middle of the night because of dreams she couldn't quite recall. She didn't even know what tied them together. Love, friendship, obligation, he never explained and she never asked. But every gesture of his carried a quiet warmth, as if he had promised something long ago, something he intended to keep no matter what it cost him. The door creaked open. Jack was back, dust on his shoes, a faint smell of sun and wind clinging to him. "The meeting's done," he said, setting a small bag of vegetables on the table. "They're starting the construction next month. It's going to be big. Names carved into stone so people won't forget." Tien nodded, running her fingers along the smooth wooden table. Forgetting, remembering, those words pierced her strangely. Jack noticed. "You okay?" She forced a smile. "Yeah, just thinking." He studied her for a moment, as if wanting to say more, but instead he unpacked the vegetables. "I bought fish. I remember you used to like sour fish soup." "Used to." The phrase landed softly between them. Tien wanted to ask when, where, but the questions tangled in her throat. She didn't want to see disappointment flicker across his face if she admitted, once again, that she couldn't remember. That evening, as sunlight spilled gold across the courtyard, Jack found Tien sitting on the old wooden bench. She was watching the sky, her hair loose, eyes reflecting clouds that drifted lazily above. "Do you want to go somewhere tomorrow?" he asked. She turned. "Where?" "The orchard," he said after a pause. "The guava trees. You liked them before." "Before?" she echoed softly. Jack nodded. Maybe being there will help you remember." Tien didn't answer right away, but something in his voice, hope mingled with a trace of fear, made her finally whisper, "All right." That night, while Jack fixed a leaking faucet in the kitchen, Tien lay awake in her room. Fragments of dreams came. Laughter near a riverbank, the smell of ripe guavas, a promise whispered under the stars. But when she tried to piece them together, the images scattered again. She pressed a hand to her chest. Why did it feel like her heart remembered something her mind could not? The next morning, Jack prepared everything quietly. A basket for the fruit, a thermos of tea, even a small folding chair in case she got tired. Watching him, Tien felt a strange ache. This man, with calloused hands and a voice as calm as the fields after rain. How many times had he done this? Taking care of her like she was something fragile, waiting patiently for pieces of her to return? She wanted to ask him, "What did I mean to you? What promise are you keeping?" But the words stayed locked inside. Maybe, she thought, the orchard would answer for him. And so, as the sun climbed once more over the hills of Tien, they set out together, toward the guava trees, toward memories sleeping under leaves and branches, toward a past waiting, perhaps, to be awakened. The road to the orchard wound through rice fields shimmering under the late morning sun. Dragonflies darted above the water, their wings flashing silver. Jack pushed the old bicycle, its basket carrying the folding chair, a bottle of water, and a small bundle of snacks he had packed. Tien walked beside him in silence. The further they went, the more the village noise faded behind them until only birdsong and the soft rustle of bamboo leaves filled the air. "This path," Jack said at last, breaking the silence. "We used to take it often." Tien turned to him. "We did." He smiled faintly, eyes on the horizon. "Back then, you loved walking here in the evenings." Said the wind felt like it could carry all your worries away. She looked down at the dusty path beneath her feet. Something about the way the wind tugged at her hair felt familiar, like a half-forgotten melody lingering at the edge of her mind. Laughter under guava trees, the smell of summer rain, a voice promising, "I'll be here," no matter what happens. Was it Jack's voice? She stole a glance at him walking beside her, his face unreadable in the silver light. Back at the house, Jack lit the small oil lamp in the kitchen while Tien sat at the table, fingers absently tracing the wood grain. He placed a plate of cut guavas in front of her. "Eat something," he said. She picked up a slice but didn't bite into it. Instead, the question she had been carrying since the orchard slipped out before she could stop it. "Jack, why did you stay?" He looked at her. "Stay? When I lost my memories." Her voice wavered. "When I couldn't even remember who I was. Why didn't you leave?" Jack rested his hands on the table. His silence stretched between them like a rope drawn tight. Finally, he said, "Because I promised you once that I wouldn't." The words cracked something open inside her. A memory surged, clearer this time. A summer evening years ago, the two of them sitting by the river, feet in the cool water. She had been crying over something. Family, dreams, life slipping sideways. And Jack, awkward and quiet as always, had said, "Whatever happens, I'll stay. I'll help you find your way back, even if you forget where you came from." And she, half laughing through tears, had replied, "Then I promise to never make you regret it." The scene dissolved as quickly as it came, but it left her breathless. "Jack," she whispered, I remember." He didn't speak, only watched her with that steady gaze of his, as if afraid she might shatter if he moved too quickly. "I remember the river," she said, words tumbling now. "The promise, the way you always put everyone else first, even when it hurt you." Jack looked away, jaw tightening. It wasn't a burden, taking care of you, waiting. But it cost you something, didn't it? His silence was answer enough. Outside, the wind rose, stirring the bamboo leaves into a restless chorus. Tien sat very still, the truth unfurling inside her like paper catching fire. This man had carried her through the dark without asking for anything in return. He had held the pieces of her life together when she couldn't even remember who she was. And all along, he had loved her, quietly, fiercely, without demanding she love him back. "Jack?" she said softly, almost afraid of the answer. "Do you still?" He met her eyes then, and whatever she saw there made her stop breathing. Because love like that didn't need words. It was in the way he had stayed when he could have left. In the meals cooked, the late nights kept watch, the orchard trip, the silence heavy with things unsaid. In the promise he had kept long after she had forgotten it was ever made. That night, long after the lamp was blown out, Tien lay awake listening to the wind. Her memories were returning slowly, piece by piece, like stars emerging one by one in a night sky. And she knew now, when they all finally came back, she wouldn't waste another second keeping her heart silent. Because some promises deserve to be kept by two people, not just one. Morning came softly, carrying the smell of damp earth and blooming hibiscus. The village woke slowly. Roosters crowed, a distant hammer struck wood where the new memorial was being built, and the river glittered like a silver ribbon beneath the sun. Inside Jack's small house, Tien stood by the window. She hadn't slept much. All night, fragments of the past had drifted through her dreams. Faces, laughter, arguments, quiet evenings under guava trees. And now, like pieces falling into place, she finally saw the whole picture. She remembered everything. The day she left the city after her mother died. The evening she met Jack by chance on this very road. The way he had offered her a place to stay when she had nowhere else to go. The promise by the river, his promise to stay, her promise to never make him regret it. And the accident, the storm, the crash, the long days when she hovered between sleep and waking until memories slipped through her fingers like rain. Through it all, Jack had stayed. He found her in the kitchen making tea. "You're up early," he said. "I couldn't sleep," Tien admitted, turning to face him. Her heart thudded at what she was about to say. "Jack, I remember now." His hands stilled on the basket of vegetables. "All of it," she whispered. "The river, the promise, the accident, everything." For a long moment, Jack said nothing. His face was unreadable, but his shoulders softened as though he had been carrying a weight for far too long. Then, he said quietly, "I guess I don't have to keep reminding you anymore." Tien shook her head. "No, because now I can keep my side of the promise too." That evening, the memorial in the village square was finished. Villagers gathered to watch as names were carved into the stone. People who had been lost to time, disaster, or war. Tien stood beside Jack, watching the sunset paint the sky in gold and rose. The air smelled of incense and earth. She slipped her hand into his. Jack looked at her, startled. "I wasted so much time forgetting," Tien said softly. "But I won't waste any more pretending I don't know what you've done for me. For years." He didn't speak, only held her hand tighter. When the ceremony ended, they walked home through the gathering dusk. Crickets sang, and the river glimmered under the rising moon. "Do you remember?" Tien said. "What I told you by the river the night you promised to stay?" Jack nodded slowly. "I said I'd never make you regret it," she murmured. "And I meant it. I still mean it." She stopped walking then, turning to face him under the moonlight. "Jack," she said, her voice trembling but sure. "I love you." For a moment, neither moved. Then Jack exhaled. A sound half laugh, half sigh, as though years of silence and sacrifice were finally over. He reached for her hand again. "It's about time," he said softly. The guava trees ripened that summer like never before. Villagers said the harvest was the sweetest in years. Jack and Tien often walked there in the evenings, the air filled with fireflies, the river murmuring nearby. And sometimes, when the wind was right, you could hear them laughing together under the branches. Two voices carrying across the fields, no longer weighed down by forgotten promises, but building a future on everything they had finally remembered.